This is likely not a popular opinion, but a number of people I know own nonprofit organizations or have set up nonprofit organizations, and I constantly ask them this one question, and it perplexes most of them. But I'm going to explain to you why I asked the question, why it's important, and why charitable activities don't need to be in a poverty mindset. I'm Justin Hitt with Sustainable Wealth Secrets. Now, I'm not speaking specifically to anyone individually. A characteristic I tend to see with nonprofit organizations that if they see somebody out in the community, they invite them to help their organization because the organization needs help. When an organization has a good cause, you can never do enough to advance that cause. The challenge is, and mainly my response, is are you making any money? Now, many nonprofits are taken aback by this because they're in the business of serving other people almost to the point of martyrdom. Now, if you're running a religious organization and you're actually a martyr and you've taken the life of a martyr, it's a lot different experience than somebody who maybe has high income somewhere else and is using this as a means of communications or social engagement. As you see in our program about charitable marketing, there are ways to use nonprofit organizations to both advance a mission and to promote an ongoing business activity. It's also an excellent way to interact in communities. That's why I was in Toastmasters. That's why I'm a master naturalist, because it gives me an opportunity to have structured social engagements in the community and to do charitable work in the community. But ultimately, if you own the nonprofit, you need to at least break even. Sure, you may not run a nonprofit to make money, but the nonprofit has essential and necessary costs that must be covered. If those costs are not covered, you cannot perform the service that you're delivering as a nonprofit. But you definitely don't want to get into the habit of struggle where you're constantly begging people to help you and you're constantly worried and frustrated because you're doing good work, but you can't get any traction, or ultimately your nonprofit or your charitable organization flounders for years and years and years. So it's okay to ask for volunteers, but in the context of operating the organization. Now, to give you a little background, I've been a director and on the board of several nonprofits many years ago. I've been directors of organizations recently. I've been a part of political action committees on the board or in leadership positions in nonprofit organizations. I was the president of our SCORE chapter here in Martinsville, Virginia for a while. I have experience in these organizations, and the mindset is consistent. They're afraid to ask for money. They'll ask you for your time, but they'll ultimately not be financially in a position to continue their mission more than the next fundraising drive. Now, there's an external world that will criticize a charitable organization that has a lot of extra money. Think about the colleges with endowments. Think about the charitable organizations that fundraise around the clock. But again, there are tasteful ways to continue your mission, to invite volunteers to your organization, to get engagement, because there are things that volunteers get out of that engagement that's not financial, and then ultimately still serve that purpose, to still forward and advance that mission. The key to understanding, though, is that you need a prosperity mindset, not a martyr mindset. The prosperity mindset is going to look for opportunities. It's going to look for places that your nonprofit organization can network, extend benefits, connect, create solutions that are self-sustaining solutions rather than something that requires your organization. That can set up grants for viable causes, have systems in place to bring in leadership. An organization that does that doesn't look like the typical charity. It tends to have sometimes paid board members. Sometimes it has paid officers. Sometimes it has organizational structures that address liability in advance of the service that they're delivering. One of the worst things that can happen is that you end up with a liability that bankrupts the organization. This happens with churches. This happens with charitable groups. Now, if you're using the charitable organization as a nonprofit or sink for your primary income, because there is a reason why some people are offended by the money question, is because they think they got caught because very often they have good income and they're using the charity to reduce their taxes, and they feel that sneaky rather than, a very legitimate thing to do. That's an issue that we can't take care of in a podcast. It's something we talk about in a one-on-one. The key to understand, though, is that your charitable organization must operate and run like a business first, because your services are provided without pay. They're third party pay. So basically, your contributors, your sponsors, those folks are the ones who are paying for the services you're delivering to somebody who needs the service, but perhaps cannot pay for it themselves, or you're subsidizing it for them. And then ultimately, though, if you're not building good quality individuals, so we'll see this very often in homelessness programs. They'll get people off the street, but then new people get on the street, which is fine for the organization because it gives you an excuse to keep fundraising. But ultimately, you're not reducing or eliminating homelessness. You're perpetuating the problem to pay the bills. So there's a balance here. But ultimately, if you're not breaking even as an organization, if you don't have tangible measurements in the outcomes that you're creating, if you're not able to show and demonstrate to your volunteers and show and demonstrate to your donors that there are tangible improvements, like how many people did you help this year? And of those people that you help, what's the recidivism rate? Now, it really depends on the type of charity you have. But if you're operating a scholarship, and you have students, of the students who are awarded scholarships, how many graduated from college? Or how many are working in the same degree area as the scholarship was? These are things that can help your donors understand that their investment in your organization, and I use the word investment, sure, they're getting a tax deduction. Sure, it makes them feel good. But when they invest in your organization, they can see long-term benefits. And that investment in your organization has got to cover the overhead. It's got to cover the fundraising costs. It's got to cover the legal and compliance related issues and the ultimate service or the application of those resources. And if all you're doing is focusing on the service part, or you're there for your own personal social group, or you're there for ego reasons, then you're not fulfilling the mission. And the mission of the nonprofit, and I have no judgment about what you choose to set your nonprofit up for, must be viable in the eyes of the IRS or whatever tax authority you have, be viable in the eyes of those who volunteer their time, money, and resources, and self-sufficient. So you need to get to a point where you don't need the donors. Sure, you're going to keep fundraising, but you start building up what's called residual accounts or endowments, where the large chunk of money will be in investments, and then that investment will generate some kind of income, and then your services are within that income. Because if it's truly valuable what you're doing as a nonprofit, why wouldn't you want it to be done forever? Now, hopefully, you solve the problem of homelessness in your town, and then you have the systems in place to keep people from falling through the cracks like that, and then you move to another town and do the same thing, or you expand your mission regionally. You don't want to facilitate the harm in order to continue the charity. But ultimately, are you designed for success? Now, I'm not looking for charitable clients. Most of the nonprofits that approach me and say, "Hey, we love your message. We believe that we can make a difference." They want me to come work for free. Only a fool works for free. And that's why I asked the money question of the nonprofits, because are you a fool doing this for nothing? I have seen people who have spent their entire life savings to solve a problem, have not solved the problem, and now they're desperate and they're frustrated, they're worried. That doesn't help anybody. You don't start a charity to become a charity. It really, I don't know how I can be more clear. The charity must be self-sufficient, so run it like a business. Have a business plan. Have a clear idea who your sponsors are and what their needs are. Why are they contributing? Be clear about that your missions are actually doing something. I really like to see charitable organizations set people up for success. This is one of the reasons I was involved in SCORE. It sets up an entrepreneur for success. That entrepreneur can then help themselves, and then over time they can help other people. And then as their organization grows and they gain experience, they can join the organization to help spread the good news, to spread the good information, to spread the education. I like Toastmasters International. Toastmasters helps build confidence in individuals and their public speaking skills and their ability to communicate. And as the members grow, they gain officer positions. The structure of the volunteer organization is to build experience and leaders inside the organization. And so the organization can self perpetuate. There is a company somewhere that is Toastmasters International that is built on these different regional chapters. Another concept that I really like to see in a nonprofit organization is an organized approach to volunteers. So you're going to have events that are just for volunteers. Then you're going to have events that are for the service elements. And then you're going to have events that are training the volunteers to be better in both realms, because you again have to build up your leaders and create your own leaders, because outside leaders may not be as aligned with your mission as you are. So we want to make sure that we're extending the mission, that we have metrics to measure the results in growth, that we're syndicating the tax benefits of that mission. Because again, charitable organizations, whether it's a charitable remainder trust, a nonprofit, a not for profit, a B corporation, a green company, it can't be just once and done. It has to continue and grow with your worthwhile mission leading the way, but you're not a martyr. The martyr always dies in the end and doesn't necessarily compel others behind it if you don't have a framework for an organization, if you don't have a structure in place. And when it comes to family trusts and things that we've talked about in the past, where you might have a pooling of money around a family foundation, and then that money pays into different types of activities. That's how a lot of the public library system came up with family foundations. Um, those things are meant to last hundreds of years, and that doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen without having some kind of structure. So, the takeaway from today's podcast is that if you're going to be involved with charitable organizations, whether you stand up a charitable organization, you volunteer at a charitable organization, or you're supporting it in some way, shape, or form, is that you want the organization to be perpetual. It needs to be creating artifacts, have an ethic and design. It needs to have structure for volunteers, structure for fundraising. And then ultimately, rather than begging for help, it should be an honor among your volunteers to be a part of what you do. It needs to work for exhibitors. So if you have an event and you bring in outsiders that are going to pay a sponsorship fee for a booth, it has to work for them. They have to make money because they don't see it as a charitable contribution. They see it as a marketing opportunity. And so if they pay $1,000 to be in a booth or to have a sponsorship slot, they expect to make at least $1,000 back. So if you can't break even, how are you going to help them break even? The key here isn't necessarily that you're going to get rich off these nonprofits. Very often, the service organizations get more money than the actual nonprofit itself. But if you have a worthy cause and a mission, don't go broke doing it. You really must maintain a prosperity mindset, a mindset of service and opportunity, where those involved, if you're asking for time, they're getting their time's worth. If you're asking for money, they're getting their money's worth. If you're in a community interacting with individuals that you're serving, that they get their worth. They get to go to the next level. These types of things are sometimes difficult to understand because we often look at charities as as charity, as a nice to have but not necessary, as a weakness in humanity. And ultimately, some people do see the more they suffer in the charity, it seems to make the appeal better or something. But to me, it's sad. So I want to see your charitable organization break even. I want to see it structured in such a way that it serves the maximum number of people, and that it ultimately is a perpetual organization, so that 100 years from now, the good works that you're doing today can continue. Not because you didn't actually solve a problem and the problem still exists, but because you were able to build a foundation and to build a structure that allows for the adaptation in environment that perpetually promotes this long-term value, this long-term service. So it's a complex idea because some people take advantage of charitable organizations, but there are others who have good work. a good focus, and they don't get the results because they believe they should be suffering rather than alleviating suffering through the services that they deliver. I'm Justin Hitt with Sustainable Wealth Secrets, and I hope this gives you some concepts behind the scenes when it comes to charitable organizations or private benefit organizations. If you've not yet got a part of those programs, you can visit us at www.sustainablewealthsecrets.com and you just ask us questions. I'm not sure the state of those particular tutorials as we do update and change our tutorials over time, but the concept is clear. There is no value in you being poor. Only wealth will give you the resources necessary that you have surplus so that you can help those who are having a difficult time and unable to help themselves. There are a number of charities that I support, a number of organizations that I'm very proud to introduce you to over time. I won't go into those right now, but these organizations ask for volunteers, ask for the money, and drive forward um, a perpetual machine in a sense that delivers value to the community, multiplies the money. They're great stewards of their resources, and then ultimately will eventually eliminate the problem they're addressing, or at least be able to provide it for new people. So they have graduates of their organization. People don't stay in the organization perpetually. Again, I'm Justin Hitt with Sustainable Wealth Secrets. Be sure to visit us at the website at www.sustainablewealthsecrets.com, where we help you understand the philosophy of money, power, and resources so that you can have these things serve you for years to come, so that you can turn your income into net worth and wealth and have it serve your family and your community forever. Thanks for listening.